Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies? I'm out of here. I like running better. Before we begin, I'd like to wish you all a happy Independence Day for all my viewers in America. Today, on July 4th, 1776, our founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence, declaring all men created equal and entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, today's a video I've been wanting to do for a while. One of my favorite shows of all time is this Thundercats 2011, which is the subject of today's video, of course. Well, the thing is, I've heard almost nobody ever talk about this show, and half the time, well, really more than half the time, it's just people saying how this show was killed because of Chima or something, which that is just not true at all, and I want to debunk that right now. So, this show premiered in July 2011, and the final episode aired in June of 2012. Chima began on January 2013. And while it's true that Chima would have started production in January of 2011, making it definitely, yes, a Thundercats ripoff, when you see good ratings, sure, but the ratings for Thundercats weren't as good as they wanted them to be, and the merchandise sales, which is where so much of the money came from because the show was monstrously expensive, those merchandise sales were awful. So, and considering how the show ended in June 2012, and they announced in January 2013, which is when Chima premiered, that the show was canceled, Thundercats was already canceled before it was announced. They must have known the show's fate was sealed as soon as the final episode aired. And there's also the fact that the art director of Thundercats said that the only reason LEGO even made Chima was because they actually had the license for Thundercats, but when that show got canceled, they just still had all those molds and used them. Okay, but now that that's all out of the way, I just want to get into Thundercats 2011 itself. Devoid of all of the stuff it's surrounded it over the years of its competition and cancellation and whatever. This show is an underrated masterpiece. It is amazing. It is shocking just how great a reboot of Thundercats is. And yeah, I know there are a lot of fans of the 80s cartoon who must be getting up in age by now. They must be in their 40s or something. And look, I'm not going to diss that show since I've hardly even seen it, but this show is just better. It's objectively better. The animation is way better. The music is incredible. The character designs are great. The writing is superb. There's just such a thing as good writing. I'm not saying the original show is poorly written, but it was just a cheesy show from the 80s made to sell toys. I'm not going to say there was no effort put into it because that's not true. I mean, even the 80s cartoons I like Ninja Turtles and Transformers, those weren't exactly Avatar: The Last Airbender. But this show pretty much is better than Avatar: The Last Airbender, I'd say. As I think the things that really make this show great are the animation, the voice acting, the writing, the art direction, and the music. So without further ado, let's do it to it. First, gotta start off with the main character himself, Lion-O. Lion-O's a really great character. He's the classic Luke Skywalker Hiccup. Well, not really Hiccup. Classic Luke Skywalker, maybe Poe type. You know, the hero's journey, that sort of story. But this is my favorite version of the hero's journey. It's done very well. He's the classic, more like Hiccup, I guess. He doesn't want to be, well, I don't think it's that he doesn't want, he's Prince. In the premiere we see, and his father is king, and he has a brother, adopted brother, Tigra. And Tigra thinks I should be king, and Lion-O shirks his responsibilities as prince a lot. I don't think he doesn't want to be king, he just doesn't really care either way. And while their father, Claudius, does definitely like Lion-O, and he's saying, yeah, he has to be king, he's my firstborn son, or my biological son, he still isn't really responsible or anything. But once Claudius is killed, yeah, Lion-O has to take over. And we just get a great arc that he goes through all these 26 episodes of his development. He learns a lot of really great lessons because I like that almost every episode of the show does teach some kind of moral. And they're not very in your face, or rather, they're naturally woven into each story, and they don't feel like they're just trying to preach something to you. They feel like actual lessons that are valuable and just things that Lion-O would have to learn. We'll get into what some of those are when I cover two of my favorite episodes, but I think he learns lessons such as you need to see the big picture sometimes. Things are not always as they seem. There is more than what you see. Or he also learns that everything has a balance. Sometimes bad things have to happen so that good things can happen. Or to trust your instincts. Which he learns in an episode where his friends all tell him your greatest enemy isn't Mumra the lizard. Your greatest enemy is yourself. Because, okay, if you're watching this video, you've probably seen the show, which if you haven't, it's on Hulu, you should go watch it. He dies in that episode. No, he just gets pushed off a cliff and drowns and dies. But through some magic-y stuff I don't want to really explain right now, he is given a second chance at life if he can pass some trials. And the first trial is he has to learn to trust his instincts. You can't always trust your eyes. Sometimes you just have to trust your ears, for example. He also learns that he always takes the hardest way possible. You don't need to do that. You just have to approach things. Now, things aren't always as hard as they appear. Sometimes things are a lot simpler. He also learns that he's king. He can use his authority. And sometimes, even if he doesn't really love being king, that's all he needs. But as he learns finally, which relates to him being his greatest enemy, is that he just doesn't believe in himself enough. As he's told, it's not that father never believed you could be king. It's that you never believed you could be king. Lionel is also just an entertaining character. His dynamics with everybody just works really well. The show is kind of like the whole cast of characters here remind me of Avatar, as in it's just how their dynamic works. It just flows so well. Everybody's role fits each character very well. And Lionel also just get to see him continuously persist throughout the show, gain determination, confidence, and loyalty from his friends. And while it's sad that the show got canceled, when I hear what was planned for season 2, I'm glad the show got canceled. And although it is a shame we're never going to get to see this version of the character finally defeat Mumra, but he did a really good job. Great character. And there's Tigra, Lionel's adopted brother. Tigra may be my favorite character. Fun fact, he's voiced by Matthew Mercer, and this is the first show he ever did. He'd been doing video games for about 7 years, but this is the first show he ever did. And he ended up getting cast and directed by the greatest director in animation, Andrea Romano. That's very odd, but he definitely lived up. He just did such a great job here. He's the classic brother of the prince who's not going to be a king and just doesn't really like it that much. And we also get to see that Tigra and Lionel have a rivalry, which really gets built onto, which we'll cover later, but as they learn, they're brothers. They can't fight all the time. They may have their differences, but that doesn't matter. But Tigra's just entertaining. He has a lot of great one-liners. He gets really interesting development, like the episode where he and Lionel meet the other tigers, because Tigra was an orphan. That's why he's adopted. And you never see any other tigers, because they all seemingly got wiped out. And of course, spoilers, they did get wiped out, but stuff happened, is all I'll say. That thing's a whole other can of worms. And I don't know, I just like Tigra. I have to talk about him. I guess I'll talk about him more later. I like his relationship with Chitara. Speaking of Chitara, she's a good character. I like her. She's kind of like Katara from Avatar. Well, another Avatar comparison. That she's the one who tries to hold the group together. And she's actually pretty competent at her job. But I also like the backstory we get with her and Tigra, and how in the beginning of the show we see that Chitara is a cleric. One of the special spiritual knights of the king, I suppose. And that she was an orphan, just like Tigra was. And Tigra saw her, he was guarding the cleric's castle, so he saw her whole story of she was an orphan, wanted to be let in to become a cleric, except she was taught a lesson that day that she just is too overconfident. She didn't truly understand that it takes more than speed, because she's a cheetah, duh. And yeah, she's an entertaining character. That's just something that applies to the whole main cast of the show. They just all have such great depth. Yeah, 'cause yeah, they do have, each character does have a lot of depth. Even though Chitara is probably the least developed of the main cast, she's good. And then there's Panthro. Okay, yeah, Panthro is probably my favorite character. Panthro is just a guy that he's a tough, hardened warrior that can still have some pretty great comedy moments. That he's maybe tough and hardened and a veteran, but he's not old. This guy still has a lot of good moves. And he just knows everybody. He's like Grandpa Max from Ben 10. In this picture here, see he was brothers in arms with this wolf dog guy because they fought together in a death pit. And he has quite a lot of history that we get explored that gets explored throughout the show. Stuff like how he was once brothers in arms, best friends with this Groon guy, who ended up betraying him after their years-long journey. And then halfway through the show, Groon dies, and because of it, to kill Groon, Panther loses his arms and gets them replaced with robot arms. As he says, defeat of your enemy is worth any price. And when he sees his halved arms, he just says, worth it. Oh, and he's voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson. You kinda can't get better than that. Then there are Wily Kit and Wily Cat. Kit is the girl, Cat is the boy. Yeah. They're the children characters, the kids, except they're not annoying. They're actually really funny, and I like them. Well, I like how they're introduced. We just see them as two pickpockets trying to make it through the big city in Thundera, and since they leave right before the big attack at the start of the show, they happen to be the only cast who survived, other than Lion-O, Tigra, Chitara, and Panthero. And they prove that at first Lion-O doesn't want to take them in because he says, we don't need to be babysitting right now. We've got important things to do. But these two prove they can more than take care of themselves. They even have 2 entire episodes dedicated to them. And I like them both. The second one is more so filler, but I mean, it's a good episode. It really is. And the first one they get is a really good episode. We get to see their backstory about how they had to run away. They ran away from their family so they'd be able to find Eldar, the city of gold, and help their family. It's a really nice episode. And yeah, another Andrea Romano show where she was able to direct and cast really good child actors. I mean, finding child actors that are good is not easy, and this show got some great ones. Then there's the main villain, Mumra, the Ever-Living. From Earth's Mightiest Heroes fans, he has the same voice actor as Zemo, Robin Atkin Downes. Mumra works because he is just the standard type of villain. He is just the pure evil world conqueror. He's the overlord type. I mean, just look at him. His creepy red eyes, his decayed body, and his hood. His introduction, which you can find on YouTube, just really sets up and it really gives you a good impression of this guy is powerful and he is terrifying. Oh, and since I hadn't seen the original, this show was able to make what was not supposed to be a surprise in the original show an actual surprise here, and boy was it a great one. He may be powerful, but this is just his decayed form. His true form is far more powerful. As he actually is this gigantic bat creature, which looks very cool and very menacing. And I like that he doesn't overuse it, because this show is not like the original Transformers or something, where the Decepticons would attack the Autobots, and the Autobots would win at the end, and every week. No, this is Mumra only showed up when it was necessary, and he only unleashed his true form when it was necessary, aka whenever the big plot episodes happened. Then there is also just the fact that we get an entire episode where Lion-O and Tigra go into the astral plane to find the Spirit Stone. So Lion-O can get it and put on his gauntlet before Mumra does. Sounds familiar. Okay, but this was done before the MCU, before Thanos was even in the MCU, and The point of this show is not really about the huge quest of finding stones to put on a gauntlet. And there are only a few stones, so most episodes can't be about that. This show is about the characters. And so yeah, Lino and Tiger go into the astral plane alone. And as we know, they already have a bit of a rivalry. Because there's a love triangle with Chitara. Except it's actually good? I mean, yeah, it actually is quite good, I have to say. One, it never takes up too much time, so never their entire characters don't revolve around that. Two, um, you're actually it's actually a good twist because you expect Chitara to end up with Lino, but she ends up with Tiger instead, and it actually still works. But also, but right before they go in, Lino is told that by mid afternoon's evening's first chime, you will be betrayed by your brother in a way you have never known, which turned out to be the whole thing with Chitara picking Tiger over him. But since they both go in and are very tension filled, Mumra sneaks in and starts pitting the two of them against each other. And probably my favorite episode, Between Brothers, where we just learn a bunch about them. Like this day that Lionel got trapped and was gonna fall into a pit and die. And of course, Lino thought for all those years that it was an accident that he slipped off the log and almost fell into a pit. But no, it turns out this whole time that Tigra had caused that to happen and just never told his brother. And this gets them really mad to the point where they eventually start fighting each other, not just over Chitara, but also over their tension that they've been building towards for years of Lionel is going to be king. After all, he's the biological son of Claudius, the actual king. But Tigra is Lionel's older brother, so even though he's adopted, he still feels that he's better and more mature than Lionel. And they have a really cool, emotionally charged duel that is just so good. But eventually, they're able to put aside their differences as Tiger tells Lionel, I know we had our differences, Lionel. But at the end, no matter what, we still called the same cat father. And then the two of them get to fight Mumra, and it looks really cool. And then there is another one of my favorite episodes, The Duelist and the Drifter. So Lionel wanders into some town where money is no good here. What they do instead is everything's determined by swordsmanship. So after impressing everybody in this town with his legendary Sword of Omens, Lionel is cocky, overconfident, and challenges this guy called the Duelist who steals the swords of everybody he beats. Lionel loses easily, and is really messed up because he can't lose the Sword of Omens. That's one of the show's main MacGuffins. Oh, and it just looks cool. But he meets this drifter guy who tells him all about the Duelist and how he shouldn't have challenged him, and how the Duelist is good. It doesn't matter how powerful your sword is because some sword maker once spent years building a sword. And then he lost to the Duelist easily because he was cocky, overconfident, and once he had lost, he spent his whole life making that sword. Everything about his life was dedicated to being a blacksmith. So once he lost that, he was completely crushed. And Lionel figures out that this drifter is that sword maker. After all, he just spends his days drifting around saying, I could help you, or I couldn't. I don't really care. But Lionel tells him, you may have sat around all these years feeling sorry for yourself, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get my sword back. And Lionel has this guy build a sword for him where he challenges the Duelist and still loses. I think, I can't remember. But, oh yeah, Lionel does lose, so this Duelist guy is just going to kill him now. But then that drifter shows up, and with nothing but a willow, he defeats the Duelist as he says, willows are weak, but they can bind wood. Because this Duelist guy was much like Lionel was that caused him his failure. Too overconfident. He thought that power was everything. And Lionel was able to get back the Sword of Omens. He learned a valuable lesson. And I think this is probably the best lesson Lionel has to learn. Sure, the lesson of don't be overconfident and cocky is one I'm sure we've all heard before, but it's done really well here. As he learns, yeah. You can't be overconfident and cocky. You can't put everything into nothing. You shouldn't be all or nothing. Because if you lose something that you invested so much time into, You could end up being completely crushed and end up being a loser, which is not something you ever want to happen to yourself. This show also has great visuals. I mean, you can probably already guess that from all these frames I've shown, but just look at this. I wish I had video, but the whole image of the destroyed Thundera in the beginning of the third episode is just so impressive, especially with the music that's playing. The show is composed by Kevin Kleisch. His music sounds sort of John Williams, Hans Zimmer-esque, John Powell even, so you know, the three great film composers. In conclusion, Thundercats 2011 is an underrated masterpiece, as I'm sure you could already tell by this. If you haven't seen this show in a while, you should watch it again. It's good, and it's only 26 episodes. It's not going to take you that long. This is a really great action cartoon with a lot of depth and heart and mystery and intrigue. I've seen this show about 3 times, and every time I go back to it, I'm just amazed by what I can take away from this. There's a lot to be learned from this show, and I'm always intrigued by its mysteries and compelling characters. And I'm not, again, as I mentioned before, considering what they had planned for season 2, I am glad this show was cancelled. But I do wish it was looked back on a little better. So comment down below. Did you ever see Thundercats 2011? If you did, what did you think of it? What do you think of this video? That's all for now, and as always, keep on juicing!